Welcome back to Green and Wild. Today we are in Tapu, visiting Denise and Don's incredible coastal garden. Their backyard garden might be small, but it's bursting with life, despite the challenges of being right on the coastline and having a very steep slope at the back. Through clever planning and years of experience, they've created a productive garden, producing lots of fruits and vegetables throughout the years. Let's take a look together and see how they've made most out of their space and transformed this unique land into a thriving food garden.
Well, welcome to the garden of Denise and Don, and this is in the lovely Tapu area on the Thames coast. And this garden was started 15, 16 years ago from scratch when we built the house. We both have a long history of gardening, and this is the third garden we've started from scratch. The first one was before we were even married. We had a little rental property that people were going out of, and they suggested that we might like to start a garden before they'd moved out. So we did. And so by the time we were married in January 1972, that garden was already thriving, and we were able to share it with the previous tenants who were friends. And at the end of 1972, we bought a lifestyle block in the Tapu Glen Road, and the garden consisted of a fence round the house that was so close you couldn't even see the fence when you looked out the window, and 3 flax bushes. And Donna will elaborate a bit more about what we did on that land there. And then we moved down here to retire, and previously we planted some bananas because there was sheep grazing on this land, and they were encased in a 44-gallon drum, and they're thriving now. So we call this a productive garden rather than, yes, because it's pretty much all about food.
Hi, well, I'm Don. Like Denise, we both grew up on farms, and our parents gardened, our grandparents gardened, because that's how people survived in those days, particularly my father's parents, who walked off a farm during the Depression and lived a subsistence life in South Otago with no power, kerosene lanterns, the garden, bought very little. They actually sold. My grandfather used to pick currants by the sackful and sell them in Dunedin, which must have been a very, very tedious job indeed. In a way, a garden is, or moving to a smaller property, it's just the same as a farm, except there aren't animals apart from the dog, but the processes and what you do is more or less the same, I think. So you learn a lot by observing, looking at what works and what doesn't. You get lots of good ideas from other people, which are well worth experimenting with. Particularly what we've been doing recently is street composting with lawn clippings and mulch and things like that, protecting the soil from the sunlight and the weather, so the soil is either under mulch or under the leaves of the plants that are growing, and that seems the worm population has really thrived on that. We have very little food waste with everything goes in the compost, which we'll have a look at in a minute. All the scraps, not blight, stuff with blight on it, we don't compost because we think that might possibly lead to reinfection, but everything else goes in it. We don't have very much food waste at all. The dog eats all bones and meat, except she's allergic to pork, so she can't have pork bones. So that's about the only main food waste we have, plus fat, which you don't want to have near your garden or your compost because it encourages rats. This little worm farm somebody gave us, and we just, it's designed so it leaks down into there. I put a bit of water in it, fill it up, and water that down a bit and go round all the plants. They all get their turn. It takes about a fortnight to do that. We do it. It's in about two stages, or three stages. This one, everything goes in, all the food scraps, peelings, bits and pieces from the garden, like this plant that's gone to seed. Just chuck it in. Load it up every day, and when it's loaded up, chuck some grass over it, wet it down a bit. Stuff that's big and coarse like this that won't compost very readily, we put in this one here, which is a separate one, and it just accumulates, and we use that for putting around the trees. From there, we just shovel it out of here. According to the experts on compost, we're not using enough brown stuff, but you can see there a very healthy worm population in the bottom, and they're not supposed to like green hot stuff, but often you'll just find them all sitting around the top, so they don't necessarily follow the script. Our compost doesn't have the amount of brown matter that you're supposed to, but it was very smelly when we first started it, but it's really settled down now and doesn't really smell much at all. So from there it goes into this one here, and the worms do more and more of it, but there's still quite a bit left to compost by the time it's gone through that, and we feed that into this worm farm here and rotate it round. But if I need compost for something and I haven't got any, I just take it out of the bottom of this one, stick it on the top of this one, break it up a bit, give the worms a few hours to escape. They'll go down into that, and then I can skim off the top what I need, and without taking too many worms out of the compost. But what we've found, the compost worms, the tiger worms, the ones that are very sensitive to light, they're all through the garden now anyway. They say that one species of worm eats the other. I can't remember which, but is supposed to eat which, but they do pretty well.
Because there's so many birds and bees, I thought I would try covering. I probably left this one too long, and I've already got visitors, I can see. But these are absolutely prolific, these grapes. We just popped them in when we first came just to get something growing, and it's very poor soil, but they've obviously love it. On this side of the house, I'd started before we came here and planted out a lot of Buxus hedging, and so I had it fairly formal right along the strip. And unfortunately got the blight. I was spraying it often and thought, do I want to be 80 and still spraying this? No, I don't. And I felt quite sad about it, but we ripped it out. I was given these pavers, free to a good home, so we popped those in. And the mondo reflects the mondo on the other side of the garden, and just to pretty it up, we've planted pansies which we've grown from seed. So don't be afraid if something doesn't work to get rid of it and start again. Because we are short on space, we actually dug up some of the pavers along here, and this plant has been absolutely wonderful. It's called Market. I bought it in Coromandel, and it just keeps loading out these wonderful cucumbers. This is a Paragon peach. It's growing on wires. You can see the support there. Even though it's a little garden, there seems to be heaps of things that we can give away. All the plants, or not the, obviously the lemon, but all the plants around there are to give away. I often take a huge bundle of greens into the food bank in Thames, and it's nice to be able to share. If you want to garden, it's a really great thing to do. It doesn't need to cost you a fortune for starters, so don't be put off by cost. All of the hedging here was just slips that we've grown on, and a good idea to join your local garden club and just have a look around. And gardeners like to share, so don't be afraid to ask for advice, because somebody will always help you out.
People will help, people will tell you things. You've got to, my grandmother used to say, I'll go on learning something till the day I die, and that's really important attitude to have for gardening. Gardening in a small space, the raised garden has advantages. You've basically almost got to have when one plant comes out, the successor goes in, because you can't afford to have your ground sitting idle too much if you've got a small space. The raised gardens have their advantages and disadvantages. They tend to dry out more quickly because of the drainage, so water can be a problem. But on the other hand, because it's free draining, plants that don't like getting wet feet tend to do quite well. And apart from that, I think you observe the old saying about the footsteps of the farmer being the best fertiliser is true in gardening, and that just means you keep your eyes open, you look for what's happening, look for what works. If it doesn't work, well, after a while, look to change what you're doing. And it's fun. I like getting up in the morning. I walk around, do my rounds, put out a bit of the juice from the worms on whoever needs it, and just have a look at the general health of your plants, and that keeps everything trucking along quite well.